The boardroom stayed completely still until his laugh broke through the air. It carried confidence, not hesitation, as if he had rehearsed it. He rose from his chair with the assurance of someone convinced he held absolute control. Every eye followed him as he lifted my contract, letting the pages sway slightly, savoring the attention before making his move. He walked to the shredder, paused long enough to ensure all cameras and witnesses captured the moment, and fed the papers inside. Each fragment disappeared slowly, falling in thin strips until nothing recognizable remained. When the machine quieted, he turned toward the table and delivered the sentence intended to define the day. He wanted the room to believe loyalty had no weight and that humiliation could serve as leadership. Several members shifted uncomfortably. Others avoided my eyes, assuming the event marked the end of my role. In their minds, a contract destroyed meant leverage erased. They believed he had closed a chapter. They believed I had lost something vital. They believed the performance was final. The truth was already moving in another direction. The contract he shredded was nothing more than paper. The Real agreement lived in protected language and authenticated files. I had placed a replica in his hands long before this meeting because I understood theatrics often tempt insecure leaders. I remained seated and breathed evenly. I allowed silence to shape the room again. No protest. No visible reaction. I met the board's eyes with calm recognition, not defiance. Power does not rush to reclaim dignity. It waits for structure to awaken. In that moment, while he celebrated a victory he had not earned, the real process began without a sound. People asked me afterward why I let the scene unfold without interruption. They wondered why I remained seated while my contract disappeared into a machine and why I allowed a public display of arrogance to go unanswered. From the outside, it looked like resignation, but people over 50 understand that silence is rarely empty. Silence is often a calculation. Age teaches you what younger professionals learn too late. You recognize when noise serves the opponent and when quiet patience exposes the truth. I had encountered leaders like him throughout my career. Men who believed authority was the same as wisdom. Men who mistook volume for certainty. Men who thought possession of a document meant possession of a mind. Their confidence always grew loudest just before consequences arrived. Stopping him would have given him a path back to safety. He would have claimed misunderstanding or stress or provocation. A confrontation would have blurred the moment and protected him from the weight of his own actions. I needed clarity, not spectacle. I needed the room to witness a choice made without pressure, anger, or confusion. Evidence requires purity, and he provided it with remarkable enthusiasm. While he performed, I observed. While he shredded paper, I reviewed the timeline in my mind. While the board watched him, I watched them. Their reactions became part of the record. Their silence documented loyalty and fear in equal measure. The contract he destroyed was irrelevant. The real document lived elsewhere, protected long before this meeting. That knowledge allowed me to sit still, breathe slowly, and let him believe he had ended something. In truth, he had only completed the final requirement I needed. The room believed the contract in the shredder represented the end of the conversation. They assumed its disappearance erased every agreement ever made between us. They forgot that paper is only symbolic when law stands elsewhere. The document he destroyed was nothing more than a printed copy, convenient for signatures and meetings. It was never the version that held weight. What governed our relationship lived inside a protected archive, written with the clarity of someone who had once trusted but still understood the importance of safeguards. Clause 7 sat quietly within that archive. It had slept there for years, unnoticed and unchallenged, waiting for a moment when arrogance would activate it. I drafted it early in my career when I still believed loyalty was stable, but sensed that innovation required protection. Clause 7 did not address salary or benefits. It defended something far more valuable. It protected authorship. It declared that any act of termination done without good faith returned every derivative creation to the original inventor. Every system, every design, every patent born from my initial work. They never reviewed it. They assumed compliance because most employees remained silent. They believed control belonged to the one holding the paper and not to the one who wrote the foundation. That assumption shaped their confidence. It shaped their laughter. It shaped the carelessness that followed. When he shredded the copy, the board relaxed. They thought they had witnessed a clean break. None of them realized that his gesture triggered the very clause he ignored. In a single careless moment, he invalidated his authority and transferred an entire intellectual estate back to me without negotiation. Their oversight became the costliest error in the company's history. The shift in the room began the moment the door opened. My lawyer did not enter with urgency. He walked with the calm assurance of someone who understood the weight of procedure better than anyone present. His arrival interrupted the lingering amusement around the table. The board looked up with the caution of people who suddenly sensed a change they could not measure yet. He greeted no one. He simply approached the center of the table and set down a single folder. The gesture was quiet, but it carried more consequence than the entire display with the shredder. The folder remained closed for several seconds, allowing the silence to settle into the space. For the first time that morning, the executive shifted with discomfort. When he opened it, the evidence revealed itself without theatrics. The original digital contract rested inside, printed from a secure archive. The timestamp confirmed its authenticity. The metadata demonstrated that it had never been altered. The sequence of signatures validated each step of the agreement. While they watched, the foundation of their confidence dissolved. There were no accusations. My lawyer simply placed a page in front of them and tapped a section with measured precision. Clause 7, highlighted years earlier during the first negotiation. The clause they had forgotten. The clause they had provoked into activation through their own impatience. He spoke only once. He explained that the termination was invalid. He stated that ownership reverted immediately. Nothing more. The impact required no additional explanation. The board did not argue. They reviewed the page again and again, each reading deepening the realization. They were not witnessing a dispute. They were witnessing a transfer of power. The revelation did not arrive in a dramatic announcement. It surfaced through a series of documents my lawyer delivered to their legal department that afternoon. Inside those documents was a list that made the room turn still once more. 34 fully registered patents. Not sketches or ideas waiting for approval. Not experiments hoping for funding. These were completed systems, protected designs, and confirmed innovations that supported years of growth. Each patent carried my name as the originating inventor, and each one connected directly to the company's highest revenue streams. Their licensing agreements depended on those protections. Their international partnerships referenced those filings. Their investor presentations relied on them to validate projected earnings. For years, they had built an empire on the assumption that ownership was settled and permanent. They never expected a single signature to reverse everything they believed untouchable. When the transfer notice reached the operations department, the effect was immediate. Production lines slowed as managers searched for guidance they could not find. Scheduled demonstrations were postponed while executives tried to understand the scope of the loss. Investor calls shifted from confident forecasts to cautious silence. Every department waited for direction, yet no direction came. There was no chaos in the hallways. No raised voices. No rush of people demanding explanations. The company entered a stillness that felt heavier than panic. A structure built on borrowed innovation had finally encountered the moment when the true owner stepped forward. I had not taken anything from them. I simply reclaimed what the contract had always promised to return. It was not retaliation. It was the natural correction of authorship. The silence that followed confirmed the scale of that correction. The board moved quickly once they understood the scale of the reversal. Their first instinct was to regain control through calm language. They invited me to a private meeting and suggested mediation as a way to rebuild trust. They spoke about misunderstandings and poor communication, hoping the vocabulary of cooperation would soften the outcome. When that failed to create movement, they shifted to financial overtures. The compensation packages grew in size with every conversation, each one presented as a gesture of respect rather than an attempt at containment. Their tone changed again when money did not persuade me. They began offering apologies, but the words carried the polished cadence of statements prepared in advance. They apologized for the atmosphere, for the pressure of deadlines, for moments of stress. They avoided the event itself because naming it would confirm responsibility. I listened to every attempt and responded with courtesy. I declined each proposal without anger because anger was unnecessary. There comes a point in a long career when dignity is not something you renegotiate after damage. You protect it by upholding the boundary that should have been honored in the first place. My refusal unsettled them, not because they felt remorse, but because they now recognized the risk that surrounded their decisions. The fear in the room grew quiet rather than loud. It lived in the pauses between their sentences, in the way they exchanged glances before speaking, and in the careful questions they asked about confidentiality. They understood that contracts are not emotional instruments. Contracts hold memory. They preserve the truth long after performances end. They were no longer trying to repair a relationship. They were trying to prevent exposure. The consequences did not unfold in a dramatic announcement. They appeared slowly, almost politely, as if the company wanted to avoid drawing attention to what had shifted. He arrived at the office expecting the same influence he had enjoyed for years, but the atmosphere changed before he reached his desk. Meetings he once led were suddenly reassigned. Invitations that usually arrived first thing in the morning now went to others. The transition was subtle enough to confuse him at first, yet deliberate enough that everyone understood its purpose. Within a week, decisions he previously made alone required the presence of newly formed committees. Projects he once approved with confidence now demanded oversight from legal, finance, and compliance. His signature lost its weight, replaced by layers of verification designed to limit the damage that impulsive authority had already caused. He attempted to maintain his usual posture, but the silence around him grew thicker each day. Colleagues who once laughed at his jokes avoided lingering conversations. Their glances carried a mixture of caution and calculation. They understood the company's direction before he did. His influence no longer protected careers or secured opportunities. Associations shifted as people recognized that the future would be shaped elsewhere. The board never confronted him openly. They did not remove him with speeches or statements. They simply adjusted the structure around him with precise intention. Reports bypassed his office. Strategies advanced without his input. Leadership circles tightened, and he found himself standing at the edge of decisions he once initiated. The room where he laughed so confidently became the room where no one looked toward him for guidance. Power did not fall loudly. It faded, uncovered by its own excess. If you are over 50, take this moment with clarity. The world will often treat experience as something replaceable because it cannot measure the years you have lived inside systems, decisions, and consequences. Respect arrives and disappears depending on convenience, but structure remains. Structure is the record that outlives opinion. Never spend your energy correcting someone who underestimates you. Underestimation is not an insult. It is an X-ray revealing how little they understand the work that sustains them. You do not need to defend your history to people who have not earned the right to hear it. Silence will do that work for you when the moment comes. Do not react when someone minimizes your contribution. Reaction turns their performance into a negotiation. Documentation turns it into a fact. Protect the origin of everything you build. Keep copies. Keep timelines. Keep signatures organized with the discipline of someone who knows that memory fades, but records do not. Read every clause in your agreements as if your future depends on it, because occasionally it will. The clause they ignore is the clause that protects you. The clause they mock is the clause that restores what arrogance tries to erase. There will be moments when people believe they have ended your story. They will shred papers, close doors, or celebrate victories built on a misunderstanding of where the real authority lives. Stay calm when it happens. Structure has its own way of speaking. Sometimes the very moment they believe they destroyed you is the moment everything returns to its rightful owner. And the ones who laugh at loyalty are usually the ones who never read paragraph 7.